That is entirely up to you.
Well, people may come in, but I know everybody has schedules, so I will go ahead and start. I'd like to do an introduction, and then I will turn it over to Travis, and he'll do as he wishes. A special welcome to everyone here today. We are excited to be hosting our classes in person once again. While much has changed over the last 2 years, our enthusiasm for presenting outstanding classes and lectures has not waned. We were privileged to have a number of our speakers present virtual talks over the last couple of years, some of which are on our YouTube. Today's event is being recorded and it will be on our YouTube when it's processed. Copies of the Balch column listing programs, classes, and tours are on the table in the back. Events are posted to our website, to our Facebook page, Instagram, and Twitter, whatever social media you use. You should be able to find something about us there. The water fountain is to the left, the restrooms are straight back. The electronic devices, if you have any kind of electronic device, please turn off or mute at this time. Masks are not required. If anyone would like to have one, please let me know, or they are in a box in the back. You're welcome to, we're happy to provide them if you decided that too many people in the room you want one. And as I said, we are recording this event. It is my pleasure to welcome back today our guest speaker, Library Associate Travis Shaw. Shaw is a public history professional with nearly 2 decades of experience in historic preservation, archaeology, and museum education. He joined the staff of Thomas Balch Library in 2015 and also serves, and I hope I have your title correct, I know there's been some changes at Piedmont, but Director of Education at the Virginia Piedmont Heritage Area Association.
That's correct.
That's correct. So please welcome Travis, and he'll be happy to make his presentation, answer your questions, and then at the end, if you want to look at it again, if you didn't quite catch something, no, it'll be on our YouTube and you will be notified of that. So I get to start recording.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you so much, Alexandra. Thank you to everyone who's come today. Really been looking forward to giving this presentation. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. Before I begin, though, I'll give you just a little bit of background on myself. As you heard, I've been a history professional for about 2 decades now. Spent basically my entire career working in history in some way, shape, or form. I spent many, many years working as a professional archaeologist, architectural historian, in the field that we call cultural resource management. It basically means, archaeology for hire before construction projects go forth, things like that. Worked in museum education. I spent some time working at Mount Vernon. I also spent some time at Oatlands, just down the road from where we are today. And as you heard most recently, I'm the Director of Education for the Virginia Piedmont Heritage Area. So very, very busy, do a lot of events like this. But specifically today, the experience that kind of matters most of what we're talking about today is that experience in cultural resource management. Of course, when you're doing an architectural survey or an archaeological survey, one of the most important things to know is who owned this property. You want to know the chain of title, how the property has changed hands, how it's maybe changed in size over the years. All of this is very important from a historical perspective. From a genealogist perspective, though, we can glean a lot of information from land records that is valuable to tracking down your ancestors. Deeds often mention family members. There's something, I think, to be said for being able to go and visit land that your ancestors may have owned. There's land records that relate to court cases. There's land records that relate to wills. All of this information can be very useful for us. And in my experience, I spent about 10 years in CRM. I worked in, I think I counted at least 20 different states and the District of Columbia. And what you guys have probably found during your time is that every state has its own way of keeping land records. Sometimes you may have to go to the courthouse. Sometimes you can go to the state archive or a local archive, a library. When we're researching Maryland, we are extremely lucky, and I'm a little biased, I am a native Marylander, very proud of this system. When it comes to researching land records in Maryland, almost every resource you need is online and available for free from the comfort of your own home or here at the Balch Library. So what we're going to do today is go through kind of the 4 most useful tools that are available online when it comes to property research in Maryland. We'll talk about how to actually use them. I'll get on the computer, show you how, a few real life examples. Talk about what situations that they're going to be most useful in. Not every one of these tools is going to cover everything that you need, but each has its own kind of niche that it fills. And we'll also, we'll just have a lot of fun today. I'll take some suggestions from the audience when we're doing some research so that we can see just how these systems work and how you can use them. Before I go forward, I saw that most of you picked up the handout that I put together. This is kind of step-by-step instructions on all the 4 systems we're going to cover today. If you have questions, my email address here at the Balch Library is on there. I've been a library associate here for 7 years now. If you want to come and see me in person, I'm usually here on Tuesday evenings. So there's 2 good ways to get in touch with me if you have questions about anything that we cover today. So with that, I'd like to jump right in, and we're going to begin. Here's the list of systems that we are going to look at today. Up at the top, Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties. Very, very useful. Also just a fun thing to waste time on. Maryland Historical Trust Cultural Resource Information System. I don't know how they got the acronym MEDUSA out of that, but MEDUSA is a lot more memorable than Maryland Historical Trust Cultural Resource Information System. These 2 systems are very, very closely related, and we'll talk about that when we get there. And then Maryland Land Records, probably the #1 source we're going to explore today. It's a little more complex than the other websites we're going to talk about, but it is the most powerful resource. It's really an amazing set of records. And then lastly, Plaques.net, which is kind of self-explanatory. It's where you go to find patented land plats going back to the 17th century. So when we do research, property research, I am always a huge advocate of not reinventing the wheel. If the research has already been done, there's not much sense in you going out, pulling together all these resources. So one of the first places I always like to start is the Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties. Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties is essentially the state version of what we think of as the National Register of Historic Places. It is a historic registry of properties that have been collected over the years, usually through some sort of architectural survey that's been done. A lot of the work I did included filling out inventory forms for this. The inventory forms are almost exactly like a National Register inventory form, so there's a ton of information on it, on each property, and there are literally tens of thousands of properties that have been recorded. I think on your little sheet there, I think I put at the time that I wrote that, there were 40,000 architectural and 13,000 archaeological sites, so thank you. So there's a tremendous amount of information that is in this list, and as I said, these forms are going to include things like narrative histories of the property, architectural histories of the property, and if we're lucky, they also include proper chains of title. Many of the properties that are surveyed are going to, in that survey form is going to include a list of everyone who has owned that property from the modern era all the way back to hopefully when it was first patented. If you are lucky enough that one of your ancestors is on one of these 40,000 properties, and this list is growing every single day, a lot of the work that you might be looking for has already been done for you.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yes.
So does this, because this goes back to the 1960s, would this include places that no longer exist, that did exist but now do not exist?
That is a fantastic question. Does it include properties that did exist but no longer exist? Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Just like the National Register, being listed on this inventory does not provide necessarily a layer of legal protection. The properties can be developed, can be destroyed. You will see sometimes when you're browsing the list notations that the property is no longer there, but it does include properties that were surveyed and are no longer there.
Okay, thank you.
So Maryland Inventory of Historic Places, it's put together by the Maryland Historical Trust, which is a department of the Department of Planning, so it's a state-run agency. You can see the web address is down here. It's also on your sheets, mht.maryland.gov/MIHP, Maryland Inventory of Historic Places. And when you pull that website up, you're going to see this, this screen here. Some links on the side, how to include a property. If you have a historic property in Maryland that you would like for it to be included, you can choose to get it included. And then you're going to see a lot of search options up here on the top bar. You're going to see search by MIHP number. I'm going to take a wild guess and assume that most of you do not know the Maryland Inventory of Historic Places number for the property you're looking for. This is a property, or excuse me, this is a number that's assigned to the property by the Historic Trust. It's just it's like an abbreviation of the county and then a number. So it's just a way for them to do record keeping. Search by property name. This is probably the most useful one. If your ancestor lived at a named property, if you have the name of a home where they lived, you are going to find it in there just by putting in either the full name or a portion of the name. And we'll show you how this works in a few minutes. Search by address. Again, if you know the street address of the property, this is kind of fun if you're just see a cool old house and you want to know if there's a history of it, you can search by address. Search by county. That's simply a list. You pick what county you want to look at and it will list all of the inventory properties in the county. And lastly, search all, and that's going to cover all of those bases. So pick one of those. You're going to go down, enter the information in the search bar here, hit search. And what you're going to get in return is a screen that looks like this. This was, I did search by county, did Frederick County because that's where I'm from. No other search criteria, just search by county. So this is a listing of properties, just part of the listing of properties for Frederick County. So you're going to see there's that MIHP number, and they're numeric. When you do by county, they start at 1 and goes all the way down. And you'll just see pages and pages and pages and pages of results like this. You'll see the name of the property. In this case, there's a mill, there's several churches. This is a site. Again, if the building is no longer there, they will also list archaeological sites. It's a little more complex with archaeological sites, not that that's what you guys are probably focusing on, but because there is a threat to the site if the site location gets out to the public, if there's, say, a Native American site, they don't want people going to that site illicitly, digging it up, stealing artifacts, kind of destroying the archaeological context. So they're a little more cagey about sites. There's a lot of information that you will not, has been redacted in them. It also includes historic districts. This is essentially, for those of you who are familiar with the Balch Library and have gone up and pulled anything out of our Lewis Edwards architectural files. We have those big filing cabinets upstairs. They have a number, 53- whatever. It has information related to the historic site. Maryland has essentially put that all online for the entire state. So very, very useful. As I said, if you have an ancestor that maybe lived at a prominent home location in the county, in the state, you can find it. And the way that this works is, once you find the property you want in the search, you're going to go over and click that little PDF icon on the right, and that is going to bring up a PDF of the inventory form.
I just noticed something that raised a question. St. Matthew's Evangelical Lutheran Church, and in parentheses, it has another name. Can we assume that at one time it went by one name and another time it went by the other?
That would be my assumption. I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% familiar with this particular church. I know vaguely where it is, but that would be my assumption. You could probably check the inventory file and it would explain why it has a separate name. You see it down here too with the Episcopal Church, First Baptist Church, Point of Rocks. That raises a very good point. Oftentimes we do have properties that have gone through several names over the centuries. Typically they will try to list it in the title. You know, you might see Mount Airy, comma, Rockburn, comma, I'm just making up names of houses, but that way you will pick it up in your search. Speaking of searching, we're gonna search a house right now. Actually, we can look up that church if you want, find out. I do want to start with a house though, just because I want to show you how this can be extremely useful. So here I am on the website. Looks just like the slide I showed you. I'm going to search by property name. And down here in the search bar, I'm going to put in the name of a house that I did some architectural survey on many years ago, a house called Stillwork. Oh, it's Stillwork in 2 words. It's my fault, Stillwork. There it is. It'll show up down there. You see down at the bottom, F5 100 Stillwork. It has the address, Green Valley Road near Mount Airy, Maryland, kind of the eastern part of Frederick County. And there's the little PDF icon. When I click on that, it is going to bring up a 34-page, in this case, architectural file. Again, very similar to the ones that you would see here at the in our Lewis Edwards files. Here is the this is a eligibility review form, basically saying that this house is eligible for listing, signed off by the reviewer. We have kind of a little check sheet. You'll see this on National Register forms. You'll see this in Virginia, has its own state register that Virginia DHR maintains. Just kind of saying what part of Maryland is it in, when is the period that it was important, what type of building it is. If it's a building, sometimes it could be a structure or bridge or anything like that. The environment. This is all just, very, very basic information. Then we get into the meat of the form. These are all typically written by professional architectural historians that for one reason or another have had to survey this building. This is a really cool 1750s farm. So here's a little bit of a history of it. That's kind of the summary. There's the actual site form. Description, it has a listing of the building itself, an architectural description, keeps going, and then continuation sheets. This is again more architectural information on every single room in this house, the outbuildings. I picked this one because it's a really well-written form. Not all of them, as we will see, are this comprehensive.
Well, even the chicken house.
Yes, here we have a beautiful architectural drawing of what the building looks like. Janet Davis, the person who put this together, is an absolute rock star. And then this is why I really like to bring this up. She did a full chain of title on the property. So she started in 1988. At the time they surveyed the house in 1994, that was the last time it had been sold. Here's the grantee, grantor, moved back. There's 1936, 1915. 1911, 1910, 1904, 1883, 1847, 1840. So she gets it back to 1840. She didn't go all the way back. But still, this is incredibly useful information. This is the kind of land record information I was talking about. So we have names. We have the size in terms of acreage. We have how much the house was sold for. Most importantly, we have the reference. These are the book and page numbers in the deed books for this property. In this case, WBT 6, so that's the book 6, WBT 6, page 193. Using this kind of information, we can then plug into Maryland Land Rec, which we're going to see later, pop that book number and that page number in and instantly bring up that very deed. Very, very helpful if somebody has done all the work for you. You will not always find this kind of information, but if you do, it's going to save you a lot of time and effort. I'm going to continue scrolling down through this because, again, as I said, she did a really fantastic job. She even included drawings of some of the hardware on the doors. They'll typically include historic maps. I can see it much better on the computer, but this is from an 1858 map, the Isaac Bond map of Frederick County. Really wonderful map of all the landowners in the county. So again, another great resource you can use. They will pull up the location of the property on historic maps if they can find it. This is a little later. This is the Titus Atlas of 1873. Again, she's got it marked up there. There's the property. This is an example of a really phenomenal inventory form. Yes.
I work in one place on 1850 map. What was the name of it again?
So the 1858 map, the Isaac Bond map of Frederick County, you can find it online in the Library of Congress's map collection. And they have a really wonderful high resolution version that you can zoom in, you can read everything very clearly. The Titus Atlas, I don't believe is on the Library of Congress. I found it online before, but you kind of have to do a little bit of searching. But the Bond map, I know for a fact, is on the Library of Congress website.
Would the Maryland room have a copy of that map?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, the Maryland room in the Seaver Arts Library in downtown Frederick would absolutely.
Janet works part-time there now.
Yeah. Well, if you see her, tell her we appreciate
I'm
her
from
work.
Frederick County.
Modern topographical maps and then photos that were taken when the house was surveyed. Really cool house. Some of the better forms will have interior shots. This house looks a little different now, but not too different. All the outbuildings are still the same. So this is an example of a really phenomenal form, a good way of kind of getting a jump start on your property research. Let's try and find another form. Pick a county in Maryland.
I'm from Washington.
Washington County, okay, we'll do Washington County. So this is just searching by county. Starting out, you'll see here the numbers go WAHAG. These are houses or structures that are in Hagerstown. Hagerstown has got its own historic district. These are part of that survey. But if we scroll down, you're going to see, we literally have tons of pages. At least, let's go to the last page. How many pages? 41 pages of properties in Washington County that are part of these surveys. I'm going to pick a completely random one. We're going to pick Echo Hill, which is near Big Pool. I like that name. I know Big Pool out near Fort Frederick State Park. Again, you're going to see the same kind of introductory. Oh, that's right, Echo. I get it now. Same kind of introductory information. Here's the classification. Much shorter description of the property. Not a whole lot. Does have information on the builder. So even if you don't hit a home run and find that full chain of title, you're still going to find information that may be of some use to you. So it's a much shorter form. Last time I did this program, I picked a random property in Baltimore County because I'd literally been to a brewery that was there the day before. And a lady in the audience raised her hand and said, "Oh my God, that's my ancestor's home. How did you know?" And I said, "Well, there's a great brewery there now." So actually, I can bring that one up. It is My Lady's Kindness, I think is what it was called. Maryland historically has some really fascinating names for a lot of properties. I should do ladies with a apostrophe. That'll probably come up. My Lady's Manor in Moncton, so northern Baltimore County. I happened to just completely pick a random property. This property goes back to the 17th century. Here's an entire history of the property, including the architectural information, including the people who live there, the outbuildings, all of that stuff. There's this is all kind of information on related properties. So really, really, really useful tool, as I said, if you know, and for a lot of people who have ancestors who came to Maryland in the 17th or 18th century, you can usually associate them with a named property. Here you can see, here's an entire history of this home and who lived there, and just keep going and going and going. Again, this is an example of a really, really well done, very thorough job. So when is this useful? This is useful, as I said, if you can associate your ancestor with a property. Yes?
If, I assume some of the county boundaries have changed over the years, so would it be listed in the county it was then, or county it is now, or?
Wonderful question. It is listed in the county that it is in now.
Okay.
So modern county boundaries, or at least, you know, when it was surveyed. So the modern boundaries, because the county boundaries haven't changed since right after the Civil War. So.
And excuse me, I have one other question. So now my house is not historic, it was built 1969, but I've traced the land back to 1793 as part of a land tract called sweepstakes. But these are more about properties than land tracts, right?
Absolutely, yeah, this is more, again, it's an inventory of structures, of buildings, also historic districts, but even with a district, it has to be comprised of some sort of structures. Land tracts, we're going to get to, and I'm going to look up that property. So that's the Maryland inventory. As I said, it's useful if you know, in particular, that you can associate someone with a particular property. The Maryland Historical Trust Cultural Resource Information System, or MEDUSA, is really kind of it's integrated with that inventory. It's a mouthful, I'm just going to call it MEDUSA from now on. MEDUSA is a GIS, a Geographic Information System, that is established by the state of Maryland. We use GIS for all kinds of things these days. It's a way for us to display and analyze geographical information. I mean, they use it to, you know, detect the spread of infectious diseases. They use it to track crime. They use it to, for military applications. It is absolutely one of the most powerful tools that we have today in almost every field you can imagine. We're not going to be doing anything crazy like that. It's very, very simple. It looks very complex. When you go to the website, again, this is MHT, Maryland Historic Trust, maryland.gov/secure/MEDUSA, MEDUSA. You are going to see a screen that looks like this. Big old map of Maryland and the surrounding states. Up at the top, there's a bar to put in an address or place. There's a bunch of tools here on the side that you don't necessarily have to know. These are tools used, for example, for measuring distance, for zooming in on particular parts of the map. 99.9% of what you're going to do is use the search bar up here and the plus and minus to zoom in and out. Anyone who's used Google Maps can kind of wrap your head around what's going on here. You can also, up on the top left, do a text search or map search. Again, you're going to use the same terms that you would use in the inventory. If you know the name of a property, something like that. If you know the address of the property, you can type it in. Again, address, you can put it up top, just like Google Maps. And what's going to come up, this is, I zoomed in on Cumberland, Maryland. I wanted to mix it up and not just stay in Frederick County. you're gonna see a bunch of squiggly shapes and dots all over the map. Every single one of these colored shapes has a very specific meaning. And literally all I did for this is I typed in Cumberland, Maryland at the top, hit the little search button, zoom in. Everything you see in red, every little dot, every square, every big blob, is a property or district listed in the Maryland Inventory of Historic Places, that inventory that we just looked at. Again, this can be kind of useful if you know the vague idea of where a site might be or a home might be, if you want to kind of get a feel for the historic structures that are in an area. We also see little yellow blotches, not so many on this map. Those are just Maryland Historic Trust owns a preservation easement on that property, not particularly, useful for what we're talking about today. Anything in purple is a National Register listed property. So anything that's on the National Register of Historic Places will show up on here. I mean, this big squiggly purple line, that's the C&O Canal. There's a few different historic districts in and around the actual city of Cumberland. Anything that's nationally listed is going to be in purple. And then you'll occasionally see little green bits too. That is what Maryland Historic Trust calls a determination of eligibility short form. Basically, it means that somebody looked at it, filled out a little form that said it's probably not eligible to be listed. So again, kind of ignore the green, ignore the yellow. What we want is the red and purple. If you click on any of these, in this case, I clicked on the Huffman farm, you're going to see the MIHP number, ALVB092 in this case, same as the property number you have seen listed on the register itself. You can see the common name of it, the Huffman Farm, the address, Crouch Valley Road in LaVale. And then you're gonna see two links, scanned PDF and database record. If you click on those, it's going to bring up the exact same form that you would have found had you searched on the Maryland inventory. So again, these two tools kind of work together. It just depends on how you want to find the information. Whether you want to, if you know the name, if you know the address, you can type it into the regular MIHP system. If not, you can look at a map and find the property as well. I use this, use it a lot when doing survey just to kind of get the context of the area. Again, it's going to bring you the same information that you can find on the other website, just a different way of finding it. So here's Medusa. Again, all those little blotches, it looks like Maryland has the chicken pox. All those little blotches are, in this case, purple, which means they're National Register properties. But if we zoom in, and we can zoom in just like Google Maps, we're gonna find tons and tons and tons of information. I'm gonna go to the Eastern Shore just because I don't talk about the Eastern Shore enough. Let's pick a random property, click on that square. This is the Almshouse site outside of Oxford, Maryland. Again, you can see here's the link to the scanned PDF. On that, it's going to bring up this form. In this case, this is an archaeological site. Remember what I said about archaeological sites earlier? They tend to be a little more secretive about exactly where these sites are. So one of the things you'll sometimes notice is they give a very big blotch. I guarantee this is an archaeological site. They don't pinpoint the exact location. You can change some of the layers on here. On the menu bar on the side here, the last little icon at the bottom, change base map. So you can change it to, in satellite imagery. Takes a while to load, unfortunately, but when it comes through, it's just like Google Maps. You can zoom in on a satellite image. Actually, they tend to be a little more high resolution. Somewhere in this circle, there's an archaeological site. The site that we clicked on earlier, the Almshouse, if this will load, you can find that. They also have topographical maps, which can be good for matching up a historic topographical map with a modern one. If you have a late 19th century or early 20th century map. So that Almshouse site that we looked at, somewhere in this field, we have, gosh, this is taking forever to load. I apologize. Usually it's not this slow. Let's change the base map to, we don't need the 6-inch modern. Let's do a topographical map. This will bring up the modern USGS topographical map. Still loading, but you get the idea. It's all very simple, and again, it's all tied into that inventory system. So it's really most applicable in the same situations, if you know the property you're looking for.
If the property is on the National Register, it shows in purple, I believe.
Yes.
Could it be on the state register simultaneously? And if so, how do they distinguish on the map?
Absolutely. The question is, can it be on both the state register and the national register at the same time? Yes, it can. Typically, you will see a purple outline that kind of is laid over top of that same red outline. I can find a good example of that. I think I might have broken things by trying to do this. Let's just go back to the street map. Hopefully that'll, we're gonna refresh and hope. There we go. I'm trying to think of a property I know that's on both. Typically, if it's on the National Register, it's going to be on the state register as well. That's a district. This is house. Okay, Linden Grove. So what you'll see here, the only difference, scanned PDF, that'll take you to the state form. NR application will take you to the National Register form. Usually there's just a lot of overlap. I tend to find more information that's useful for genealogists in the state forms because they'll actually oftentimes do those chains of title and so forth. In fact,
Now, I had sort of a follow-up to that, because Penmar is on the national, my uncle, my great, however many uncle, owned one of the hotels up at.
oh, okay, sure, yeah.
Back in the day, and it was burned down by the fire department, because Penmar went, But anyway, Penmar itself is in the National Historic Register. I wondered if you've ever come across where individual buildings within an area were actually on the Maryland. I wasn't aware of this Maryland one, so I've never looked for it before.
Absolutely, absolutely. And since you said Penmar, let's look at that, because we've got time. We've got till noon, right? So let's go up to Penmar. Penmar's gonna, you could also just type in Penmar into the thing here. I think this is the district here, right?
Yes.
That's it. So this big red rectangle is more than likely a district that encompasses all of historic Penmar. And then you'll see there's individual properties within. There's 2 properties. Also something that's, I know exactly what that is. Up on the Mason-Dixon line, you'll see these little circles. Those are boundary markers from the survey. So we've got, good question. So when we click this square, it's going to bring up the entire district. This is the Penmar survey district. Districts tend to not have as much detail in the individual listing because you're trying to characterize the entire district rather than focus on a single property. So how do we look at the single properties they're within? If we click on one of the single properties, it's still bringing up that same Penmar Park survey. But you'll notice at the top it says 1 of 2, and there's a little arrow. So that's if we want to look at the whole district. If we click the little arrow, it's going to zoom in on that particular house that's listed, in this case 14622 Maryland Avenue in Penmar, and that is an individual property. Yeah, so there is overlap. You will see individual properties within districts. You'll see state properties that are within a National Register district. All of the information that they have, whether it's state or national, will be on here. So that's not, no, their property, if it's the hotel, is it up on the road up here somewhere?
No, actually, it's, well, because I know, actually, it was right in here.
Right in there, okay. So there's a chance it might be mentioned in the district nomination.
It is mentioned in the district,
so there you
and
go.
they do have pictures of a bunch of the houses that were existing at the time, but none of the ones that were the hotels that are gone. It mentions the hotel. It
Right.
has a picture of it that I already have pictures of from 1904, but nothing since then.
Nothing since then,
Yeah, I've
yeah.
been trying to figure out more about that.
So it's a fun tool to play around with. I've spent a lot of time just kind of wasting time reading history on those things.
Once you put in the location, you put in the name of that town, I suppose,
Mhm.
then you can go in or out, and still see whatever is in a larger area.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Real quick before we move on, since we've already looked at this property before, I went over to text search. I'm gonna hit architecture. It's gonna bring up kind of the same thing. We'll look at that property still work that I was looking at earlier. And it's gonna bring it up over here on the side, F5 100. Click on that. There's still work within this larger context that I had to survey many, many years ago. So if you know the property name, you can do it. You can put in the town name. You can zoom in and out just like you would with Google Maps. It's a lot of fun. You'll find out a lot about your community using this tool.
What's the green map tag?
That's showing exactly where that property that I put in is located. So
Presumably if you zoomed in far enough, it would disappear.
yes, here we.
Yeah.
Or it just gets smaller and more exact. You can see they actually mapped out the locations of the buildings. That's the main house. That's the barn. Chicken house, I think is that one out there. It's been a while. So fun tool, useful tool for doing property research. Again, if somebody has already done the research for you, or if you know the name of the property you're looking for. I'm gonna bring up still work just because I want to use it as an example that I know I can get away with. Okay. Oh, go back to the slideshow, that would help. All right, this is the meat of what we're going to discuss today. This is the most useful tool. I also find it to be kind of one of the most intimidating tools, at least when you're starting out. But once you've spent some time with it, it will become the absolute most useful thing on the internet in terms of doing property research in Maryland. And that's Maryland Landrec, or mdlandrec.net. Here in Loudoun County, for instance, if I want to look up a deed, I have to go to the courthouse or come here to the Balch Library, although our deeds don't extend quite so far into the modern era. You're going to have to look it up on microfilm. You're going to have to find it in an index, find out what book, what page number you're going to need. You can literally do all of that for the entire state of Maryland, going back to the 17th century, from your couch. Maryland Landrec. It's not the most user-friendly, it's not the prettiest website, but it is incredibly useful. So when you go to the website, you're gonna see this kind of little disclaimer here, 24 elected the court clerks of Maryland, Maryland State Archives joined together in partnership to put this together. Provided at no charge, it's the most important part. All you need to do is apply for a username and password. So when you first go to the website, it's going to say new account, just click there. It's going to ask you, basically, you put in your email address, you fill out a very short form, you come up with a password. Then you are set to go. You enter in your login, email, password, and you are off to the races. It's going to bring you into the main page, very simple. Up at the top left, there is a drop-down menu to select the county. It's all based on county. So you're going to select your county. In this case, I chose Frederick, of course. One thing I always like to point out is up at the top for each county is going to bring up the courthouse contact information. So if you have trouble or if you can't find what you're looking for, it will have the email address, the phone number, the name of the clerk that you need to contact, and this is for every single county. So very, very useful if you get stuck, if you're having trouble. you can contact them directly. Now, for every single county, the search page is going to come up the same. You are going to see on the left a list of search functions. You've got instruments, so if you know the book, if you know the page, you can just put it right in there, the clerk's initials, book number, page number, go, and it will take you to that page.
Where does one get the clerk initials?
So if you remember back when we were looking at still work, and I actually have it up. When we were looking at that, you'll see in this chain of title, some of the books have initials in front of them. So in this case, AF7403. That's the clerk's initials. You don't need to put it in, it's not required, but if you have it, those you will only see generally on books from the 19th century and older. Anything from the 20th century is just going to have a number, in this case like 292, 568. Great question, because we don't always have that information. You might have a document that says what the page number is. What am I doing here? The page number, the book number. If you don't have that, we have other methods of finding things out. Over on the left, we have an individual search. If you know the individual's name, you can put their name in either as the grantor or grantee, and it will pop up.
But this is just for Frederick, I'm sorry.
Oh, this is for every county.
Really, because I don't get that for, I use this a lot, and I've never
Oh, you've never
got that
gotten
for Baltimore City.
Oh, Baltimore City is different.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Baltimore City is isn't quite as good.
Okay. But
Mostly, I think
all the counties have it.
most of the counties have it. The problem is it doesn't cover the entire breadth of records. For Frederick, it only goes back to 1972. Which means the records are there, but unless you know someone who's lived there in the last 50 years, you can't find them in the name search.
Oh, that's why I've never searched, because all the records I search are way before you.
Way older, yeah. And that's just a simple function of, we're talking about so many, like hundreds of thousands of records, they haven't gone through and picked out each individual name out of each individual one. That doesn't mean we're completely lost here. With a property, you can find out who owns it now. This link down here for SDAT, that's kind of the state GIS that covers modern like tax information and stuff. You can find anything that's public record in there, you can find. So you could pick a property, find out who owns it now, put them in here, and go back from there. You can also, again, if you have a document that lists the name of someone, here in Frederick over the last 50 years, in some counties it's a little different, but you can find the individual name. What if we don't have that? We can go to the indices. Further down the list, we have active and retired indices. It explains the difference here. Basically, the difference is between active and retired is the Archives of Maryland asked the counties to provide these indices. In some cases, they sent the original paper copies. In some cases, they sent microfilm. In some cases, they sent an index to the archives, but then kept adding on to the index at the courthouse. Say they sent the archives in 1965, or sent it to the archives in 1965, anything newer than that is probably still being used in an active index. So it's always helpful to search both the active and the retired just in case. I always start with the active because those tend to be the most comprehensive. So again, you've got the same thing. If you know the book and page, you can go, and then you're going to see a drop-down list that has the individual indexes. In this case, the first one that pops up, Land Records Index Microfilm 1745 to 1851. So this is the first index for Frederick County, covers 100 years of history. You click on those, it's going to pull up the scanned microfilm. Here's a book covering 1748 to 78. 1778 to 1803, 1803 to 1815. So if you know when your ancestor's there, you can find them in the index. It's not as easy as just typing in their name and finding them like you can from 1972 on, but you'll still be able to find them. Anyone who's looked at a deed index, like the ones that we have in Microfilm up here, is going to be familiar with what it looks like. You know, in this case, this is an index. This is from that original book, or the second book, 1778 to 1803. You guys have probably seen these before. I like to say they're vaguely alphabetical. You know, it is by the last name, but because it's an index that they continually add on to, it might not be in perfectly alphabetical order. But you know, if you're looking for a last name that starts with R, you go to the R's and you look at the list for that period. So in this case, you know, here is the that is the book number, page number. This is the date. This is the grantor, grantee. I obviously started with the A's because this is Andrew Arnold. And that is, it's kind of hard to read on here. I can't read who the property went to. But these exist from the, basically the establishment of the county, whenever the county was first established, Frederick County, you know, 1740s, up until the current index. So you found your ancestor in the index, so what? How do we move on from there? It's very, very easy. Up at the top, there's a little button that says Jump to New Volume. When you jump to New Volume, it's going to give you a chance to put in the book number, page number, and it'll just bring you right there. So in this case, I don't know why I picked this particular record. It was probably one of the ones I found in the index. WR3, page 167 or 176, hit go. It's going to bring up that page, or this is the index, I'm sorry. This is before I hit it. So I picked a random one, WR3, 176, hit go. It's going to take you right to that page. WR3, page 176. The information that you need to find these deeds and to do that chain of title typically lives within the deed itself. If you've read a historic deed, you'll oftentimes see, you know, so-and-so, a resident of Washington County, Maryland, on this day, you know, grants this property to so-and-so for the sum of however much money. It'll have the metes and bounds of the property. And then typically at the end of the description of metes and bounds, it will say, being the same property as recorded in book WR to page 50 or whatever. You can typically, at least in Maryland records, leapfrog from deed to deed very, very easily. And it's made all the easier by that jump to new volume page. If you're reading the deed, you find that description being the same property as described in, you can just enter that information in and go straight to the next deed. It's a great way of just working your way backwards.
In the case of this, of a deed, many times they go several pages.
Yes.
Will this then allow you to automatically go to those different pages?
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's up here, and I'll show you how this works in a second. You'll see previous and next. That allows you to just scroll through the pages. You can jump to a page. You can display a range of pages. So if you know that the deed's, you know, between pages 25 and 30, you can put in 25 and 30, it'll come up. The other great thing about this is, and I'll show you how this works on the website when we pull it up, these PDFs, you can print directly from them and you can save them directly from this system. So I am going to, again, play around with that one property that we have. First of all, let me pull up Maryland Land Rec. Here's the home. I've already signed in. This is the main page. I'm going to select a county. Again, we're going to work on that Frederick County property. So we're going to pick Frederick from the list. Oh, it signed me out because I took too long. It will log you out after a while if you don't use it. So you guys can't see my password here. I'm gonna submit, there we go. All right, now we're gonna pick Frederick County. It's going to bring up that page, just like I showed you. There's Sandra Dalton, the works at the courthouse. Just for the sake of our little experiment here, I'm gonna pull up one of the deeds that was mentioned in that property still work. We're gonna start with one of the more modern ones. I'll get the one from 1936, so 402/176. 402 is the book number, 402. When I say 176 was the page, 176. We're gonna hit go. It's gonna take a minute. Here is the deed from June 2nd, 1936. It's all right here. This is the first page. We can click next to go to the next page. It'll load the next page. This one's pretty short, it's only 2 pages. If we wanted to print this out, up in the top right, you'll see this little icon of the printer. You hit that, it'll print it right out. If you want to download it, you click the little arrow. We can zoom in using the tools at the top here. We can zoom out. We can turn the page if something is sideways. In this case, as I said, this is the 1936 deed, but if we look down here, we see a description of the property. First, all that tract and parcel of land and real estate, which is conveyed to Jesse C. Walker and Lula Mae Walker, his wife, by Samuel Ramsberg and E. Mark Ramsberg, his wife, by deed bearing the date March 15th, 1911, duly recorded in Lieber HWB, so that's the initials, number 296, folio 130. So this is the prior deed to this one. All we have to do is hit.
Actually, before you do
Oh,
that,
yeah.
can I ask a question? This is where I use this site, like I'm on it hours every day, so I'm familiar with this.
Sure.
But where I get stuck is stuff like, that's fine for the next one, but if you keep reading down and it says, and also in this one, and also in this one, and that's where I'm like, it's easy when there's one, but what do you do when there's multiples? Does this mean the property that they're describing is part of a whole bunch of other properties, or abuts it, or?
That is exactly what this means, and that is the case with this property. Sometimes we don't have a clean progression from one to another. In this case, I think there were 3 different properties that were squished together to make this property. I wish I had a good answer for you. In that case, you're literally going to have to follow each one.
Yeah.
I basically end up with like a flow chart of like, here's 50 acres here, here's 40 acres here, they came together here, they added 100 acres here.
Okay.
There is no easy answer for that. And that's fairly typical, especially for rural counties. You see pieces of property transferring hands, being combined, being split apart. The best thing you can do is literally chase back each single one of them.
Yeah, I guess it's a matter of drawing maps, which is not my strong suit, and something, when I look at this, I like, all right, which one is the most important one? Because I may be tracing, because for me, I may be actually tracing my ancestors, like when did they buy and sell this particular property, and so I want to go backwards for there, so I might not look at all of them, but that's where my mind just turns to cottage cheese.
I absolutely understand. One of the good things though is once you get back to a certain point, you typically have the opposite happening. You have parcels being split out of larger parcels, rather than, in this case, smaller parcels being combined to make a larger parcel. But yeah, there's really no simple answer for that. You just have to follow each trail.
But the explanation that that's what it is helpful.
Yep, that's exactly what this is. I mean, you can see it pretty clearly. Say first, that's a parcel, and yeah, here's like another reference to another deed from 1901. There's a reference for a deed from 1904. This is made up of multiple parcels. So maybe it wasn't the best example, but you get the idea. Now I said, if we wanted to follow up, let's just follow up on this first one just to make it easy. This one that was transferred in 1911. So we have the book number, we have the page number. All we have to do is jump to new volume, and the thing I love about it is it still allows you to see the page you're working with. So you can read directly from this. In this case, we know that that deed is HWB, is the clerk's initials, 296 is the book, and 130 is the page. We hit go, it's gonna think for a second, and it's gonna pull up that deed. And it just keeps going like this. As I said, typically the prior deed will be mentioned in this deed. In this case, here it is right here. 1910, it was sold, recorded in book HWB 292, page 568. So we can, again, jump to new volume, HWB 292, page, what did I say, 568. And this theoretically should, there it goes. Take us to that 1910 deed. And if we look at this, there's a 1904 reference. That looks like STH, number 267, page 2. You get the idea. We can go back.
Doesn't it, if you put in just a book number and a folio, if there are multiple ones of that book, it gives you the list, so it helps you with those initials?
Very, very good point, yes. I sometimes have trouble reading the initials. Pretty common. So let's use this as an example, because I can't really tell what those letters are, but we can read that it's book 267, page 272.
There's only one.
And there's only one, so that wasn't the best example, but if there is, you'll see a list, that could have been STH or SIH or whatever the initials might be, and you can pick your book from there.
I've also run across where I put in what it is, but there's a different book for lands and deeds, and they both have the same numbers, but it'll give you the date range. Like this is the deed book for STH 269, whatever, is for 1898, but the mortgage book for that same thing is 1903. So it gives you lists, it gives you options.
Yeah, it's really, really good about, when you first look at this, it doesn't look particularly user-friendly, but it does do a good job of pulling together the information that you're looking for. This is just real quick. What we're going to do is I'm going to pick a random county, we're going to pick a random index and try to find something. Since I went to college at St. Mary's County, we're going to go to St. Mary's County. We're going to look at, just pick a random active index. One thing you will see is not every county's index goes back. Of course, this is something we encounter all over the place. Maybe the courthouse had a fire, maybe the books disappeared. Certainly here in Virginia, we have a lot of problems between 1861 and 65. So you may not necessarily find everything you were looking for. In this case, I think, there are no retired ones for St. Mary's. Let's just pick, this 1827 to 1950. And so here are the books, 1827 to 1907, 1907 to 1930. The accession number. We're going to pick a random person. I said we would, but the internet is being a little slow here. Maybe I should have picked a different county. There we go. Some of these files are absolutely massive, as you can imagine, so they can take time to load. So here's an index book. Just go page by page. Pull down, we'll go to the kind of the middle of the book here. This isn't like the best example I was looking for. We're gonna pick a different county because I don't want to do this. Worcester. They have ones going back to the 1660s. That sounds way more fun. So what we should have, there we go. Here's a deed. Robert Allen to William Elgood. A deed, and this is the book number, just says old. Book 14, page 108. So jump to new volume, we can go 14, 108, and if we're right, we're gonna find Robert Allen here. Ooh, here we go. This is an example of what you talked about. If we don't have the clerk's initials, we misinterpret them, it's going to bring up a list, here's 1746 to 1753. That is our old 14, that's the one we were looking for. We also have some later 18th century ones, HD 14. It's basically going to bring up every book that is book 14, and you can do your best to figure out what the handwriting says and what the time period is that matches up with the record you're looking for. In this case, we know it's old 14. So we're gonna pull up old 14 here. And it looks like this was a cool one. It's a mid 18th century deed. So here we go, there it is, right there. This is Robert Allen of Worcester County in the province of Maryland. And who's the other? Oh, William Elgood. Okay, cool. So as you can see, there's just, as you were saying, you can spend hours on this. This is the most useful tool available when it comes to researching land records. That's why I spend the most time on it. It is incredible. I wish every state had this. I wish Virginia had something like this. It would make my life a lot easier. Very, very, very powerful tool. This is where you're going to find the bulk of your information. It's, cannot say enough about it.
Now, for the index, the one you brought up for the prior county, does the help have how to utilize that type of index? Or I know the Maryland State Archives has those different indices on their help page.
Yes, if you're having trouble with that, I would go to the Maryland State Archive page. They have kind of the best user guide.
And they have a YouTube video about it too.
Yeah. So the archives, very, very helpful. They have professionals that you can either call or email, and they can assist you with this. The other thing you can do is, again, at each county page, it has the reference to the county clerk. You can reach out to them. I would say go to the archives first because they're more used to dealing with the older records. They're going to be more helpful when it comes to 17th century, 18th century records.
Is there ways to be able to search based on a manner?
We're getting to that. That is how I'm going to finish this up. And I'm glad you brought up manners. So,
can I make one more suggestion too? When you come across these, now it's one of the things I hate to do, but I transcribe them because I was on Facebook the other day and a young person, I'm thinking under 25 or so, who I'm excited is interested in genealogy, but posted one there, can someone please translate this for me? I can't read it, and it was in English, but it was in cursive.
Right.
Because he never learned how to use cursive. So it's really important because this is what I've heard, that future genealogists are gonna have a hard time reading these. So I always transcribe them for anything that's more permanent so that future generations know what it says.
It's incredibly helpful. And I mean, I'm old enough, I learned cursive in school. But even if it's legible, I mean, I have a hard time reading some people's handwriting. This is spectacular handwriting. Some of these clerks, really, really wonderful. Some of them not so good. So transcription always helps. And social media is actually a good way of working, kind of crowdsourcing those transcriptions, just like this young person did. If they're having trouble, there's a lot of Facebook groups and other groups on social media that, we help out with. I help out a lot of my friends in the field, we look at letters from the 18th century, trying to transcribe them, figure out what they're saying. Sometimes it just helps to have a different set of eyes. Or if you get used to someone's handwriting, a single person's handwriting, it makes it easier. So.
I think that there's no way then to go back and post your transcription on the website and help the next guy.
You can't post it on the Maryland Land Rec, no, but, for instance, if you're looking in a certain area, I know there's, Maryland genealogy groups, or a certain family, a lot of families, like if you go to Ancestry's message boards, you'll find people who are searching for certain families. That's a good place to share that information.
And historical societies, I actually visited the Dorchester one recently to find out about some family members there, and they have a nice library, but they didn't have my family or the be associated. So he asked me if I would, create something that I could submit there. So that, so anyway, I might not always transcribe records, but for this particular, I know I'm going to look at it once and that's it. But for this case, I will, because that way future people visiting the Dorchester Historical Society will be able to read this.
You are the best kind of genealogist. We, here at the Balch, we've been extremely thankful to have genealogists who do very similar work to you, who've donated those kind of transcriptions and records and family trees to our family files section. And you would find similar files at any sort of library that's, the Maryland room at the Seaver Arts, or any sort of local history library, historical society would be the kind of place that they would be looking for those records and those transcriptions. So if you go through the trouble of doing the transcription, passing it along, helping out the next person, is very helpful. All right, so we were talking about manners. Somebody brought up manners. All right. This is the last part of our presentation today. Again, we have another mouthful. Digital Image Reference System for Land Survey, Subdivision, and Condominium Plats. Or, in layman's terms, Plaques.net. This is another very similar website to the Maryland Land Rec. It's, again, in partnership with Maryland State Archives, with the different county clerks at the different circuit courts. And this is basically the geographic counterpart to Maryland Land Rec. Maryland Land Rec keeps all the deeds, all of the kind of textual information. All of the actual survey plats are going to be found on Plaques.net. Of course, a plat is a map showing, depicting land ownership. Here in Maryland, plats are made all the time for property, and the website is literally just Plaques.net. I don't know how they got that. No other state jumped on that, but Plaques.net. It's going to work in a very similar way to Maryland Land Rec. The biggest difference is you don't have to sign in, you don't need a username, you don't need a password. You're just going to pick a county up in the top left, just like we've done a million times before today. And it's going to bring up, again, a kind of similar search page. Basic search. If you know the book number and page number, you can find it. If you know the plat number, chances are you're probably not going to know these, but if you do, you can enter them in and go directly to what you need. In this case, I picked Carroll County, just to mix things up. Again, it's going to have the courthouse contact information in the corner. Where you're probably going to go, though, is over on the left. We have a basic search and advanced search. Those are kind of the two biggest ones that we're going to use. Advanced search is my go-to. Advanced search, if we know the date, if we know the book or plat number, we know the page number, if we know the description. Description is the key. You've talked about manners. A lot of historic properties in Maryland are associated with a manor. In fact, almost the vast majority of plats in Maryland are patented in the colonial era, meaning that someone has a piece of land surveyed, they apply to a land agent who's, works for the proprietary government for one of the Lords of Baltimore, and they are going to patent that certificate of survey. And typically a plat is going to be a part of that. There are a few that post-date it, particularly with Revolutionary War veterans who are issued land out in what's now Garrett County, the far western part of Maryland. They're going to be patented a little later on, 1780s, 1790s.
When you say patented, does that mean they were just given the land like a land grant? The King of England gave Lord Fairfax a zillion acres or something?
More or less, yeah. Maryland, for most of its history, is a proprietary colony of the Calvert family, the Lords of Baltimore. They would have land agents here in the colonies. People would apply for grants or were given grants by the government. They would send someone out to survey it, and the surveyor would submit that survey to the land agent, who would then check it off, say, yep, that's your land now. which is one of the reasons actually Maryland, because it is such a small state and because it, was fairly well settled early on, you don't see a lot of grants after the colonial era. As I said, they're very rare after that. There are some really weird exceptions. Occasionally, a survey wouldn't quite line up and somebody in the 1960s said, oh wow, like actually the survey line's over here and it's over here. There's like a sliver of land that wasn't patented. Those are like the exception to the exception to the exception. Almost everything is going to be patented before 1800. Now, that's the original patent. There's a lot of resurveys that happen. Occasionally when property is bought or sold, it's resurveyed. If a property is added to, a lot of these you'll see addition to said property. Those were all going to be in there. So again, if you have a description of the property, and what they mean by description is the name. So if we know the name of a manor, we can put that in and it's going to bring it up. If you don't know the name, down below the search area, you're going to find a list of references. In this case, these are patented certificates from 1773 to 1970, or 1920, 1920. Unpatented 1740 to 1884. The difference between patented and unpatented certificates is not all that important to what we're doing necessarily. Sometimes a certificate of survey could be surveyed, could be submitted, but for whatever reason isn't officially patented. So that's going to pop up in those lists. So really start with those two. The rest of the links down below tend to be links to the Maryland State Archives and their finding aids. So say you're looking for property that's mentioned in chancery papers, it's not going to bring up the digital scan the way that Maryland Land Rec will, but it'll take you to the place of the Maryland Archives where you can find more information on that. We have maps. They even have modern plats in here. If you're anyone building condos in the state of Maryland, there is going to be a plat that is submitted that shows where the buildings are. State Highway Administration plats for like right-of-ways for roads. Again, this is not particularly useful for the genealogists, but it is here. So if we look at the reference book, in this case I looked at the Carroll County one, 1773 to 1920. Important, Carroll County didn't exist in 1773. It's a 19th century county, but because these properties are located there now, they show up in the book. What we're gonna get is a list, and the list is alphabetical. Here's the name. This is Akron Pond resurveyed. So this is a resurvey done in November of 1800, 382 acres, patented certificate. It has been directly scanned, 5 pages of direct scans. In this case, they took the actual paper plat out and scanned it. Some of them are microfilm scans, not too often. Usually they're typically taken from the direct document. So this is alphabetical, so here we see Andrews Folly. This is patented by Richard Andrews back in 1788. Andrews Hope, corrected. When it says corrected, that's just a resurvey. That means that someone went out and fixed the boundary lines a little bit. 1802. So what do these actually look like? In this case, we looked at Akron Pond resurveyed. You click on the accession number over on the right, and it's going to bring up a direct scan. This is Akron Pond resurveyed. This is from looks like they did the survey in 1798, and then that patent was issued 2 years later. Sometimes it takes a while for paperwork to go through. So it's direct scans showing, you can scroll down just like you did with Maryland Land Rec, and you will see the actual survey map. So I want to show you guys what that looks like. You mentioned you had an ancestor who lived in a
Sweepstakes.
Sweepstakes, okay.
Yeah, not an ancestor, just the property my house sits on.
Okay.
It was part of sweepstakes.
So you said Washington County?
Yes. Well, it was probably Frederick County back then, though.
Okay.
It actually straddles the border.
Because Washington County was 1776, yeah. So we'll check Frederick County first, and then we'll check Washington. But again, here's all of those links that you can find, like right-of-way plats from 1977 to 97, if you want to know why a road is where a road is. Zoning maps, state roads. There's all kinds of weird information that's going to go in here. Really, the ones genealogists are going to look for are those certificates at the top.
I can say one exception. My ancestor's house was actually bulldozed to put in I-95 in Baltimore County. So that would actually be very
You
helpful.
could find the right-of-way plat for when they put 90. Yeah, absolutely. It's there.
I've been looking for that information for a long time, and now I know where to find it. Sorry.
No, that's, this is exactly the kind of discoveries we're here to make today. So we'll check, actually, we'll just go to advanced search because it'll search them all. You said sweepstakes?
Yes.
Sweepstakes. Maryland land plats tend to have really fun names. So here we've got a few hits. These are actually all modern ones, so I don't think we're going to find your sweepstakes here. These are all from the 1970s, but we're still going to look at one just for fun. Sweepstakes, Section 1, Lot 4 to Martin Klein, 1979. There it is. That's a modern plat that we've all seen. Let's try Washington County then. Hopefully we can find the one we're looking for. I might also want to try it as 2 words because sometimes, okay, I think we may have a hit here. That bottom one, 1814, addition to sweepstakes. So this is an addition to it. Looks like they're adding 86 acres to a previous property. We'll pull up that actual file. Addition to sweepstakes, 86 acres surveyed for Jacob Benton. There is the description, and then there's the actual land plat, the drawing down at the bottom. These are surveyor's notes. If you're not a surveyor, they're maybe not the most helpful, but again, if you really want to drill down and find a piece of property that belonged to your ancestor, this is a good way of doing it. Again, just like with Maryland Land Rec, you can zoom in, you can print it, you can save it. You can, over here on the right, you can directly download each page individually as a JPEG if you want, or you can save the whole thing as a PDF. I'm surprised that the addition is on here, but not the original, and there's probably a good reason for that.
Is there a next page?
No, just 6 results. One of the reasons that might be is not everything has been scanned when it comes to plats, unlike the deeds, still a work in progress. So up here on the top right, you'll see a little checkbox that says show records with no image. So we're gonna try that again. Now we're seeing a whole bunch of stuff. We have some properties that coming out of different record groups. Looks like they did a resurvey. Not sure if all of these are related to the property that you're interested in, but they're there. If they do not have a scan, you're not out of luck because you can take that accession number and you can contact Maryland State Archives. You can go there and you can find it at the archive. It's there, they just have not scanned it yet.
Well, I'll just mention, because I don't know if you're going to mention it, the Tracy Land Tract patent, the Tracy Land patent records. That's how I found it. It's for Carol Frederick in Washington County.
Okay, yeah.
Dr. Tracy, I don't know what kind of doctor he was, but anyway, apparently he was fascinated by the land in that area, and so he made up all these maps and he put on index cards.
Oh, yeah. Yes, the index cards. I do know what you're talking about.
So I was able to trace that, and also newspapers. To
Newspapers.
get back to 1793, but of course it was like an 1,100 acre property, and I own 7 acres of this.
Right.
So I'm curious of, what the rest of it is.
Yeah, that's, again, that's very common. A lot of these tracts were hundreds or even thousands of acres. One of the ones I usually bring up is actually a property called Tasker's Chance, which is basically where the city of Frederick is today. I think it was originally like 7,000 acres. It's huge. You can find a lot of that information. Another great source, there's a book, I know we have it here, Pioneers of the Old Monocacy has a lot of the original land tracts in Frederick County. There are similar books for other counties. I know that, for instance, down in St. Mary's County, there's a list of, again, index cards done by, I'm forgetting her name. She just passed away a few years ago. She was an amazing historian. It'll come to me, I'm sure, as soon as we're done, and now it's on camera that I'm embarrassed. One of the historians who worked for Historic St. Mary's City collected information on basically every colonist who lived there in the 17th century and kept them all on index cards. Those have all been scanned. They're now at the Maryland State Archives. So you'll see references to properties in there. You'll see references to a lot of these tracts on the Maryland inventory forms, if you've got a tract that's on the Maryland inventory form. So this is just another layer, and enables you to go and see what some of those actual surveys look like, get a better idea of what the actual property looked like. Lois Green Carr, there's her name. I thought of that. Say Lois Green Carr, absolutely amazing historian who compiled just a tremendous amount of information. Speaking of St. Mary's County, I'm going to pull up one that I know is on here because I was practicing the other day. Another property I know. Down near historic St. Mary's City, there's a historic home called Clocker's Fancy, owned by the Clocker family. Again, I don't know the number it is, but if I put in Clockers, Clocker's Fancy, Daniel Clocker, 56 acres. The patent date on that is 1745. We can pull it up. Here's the actual survey of the property. Again, this is if you really want to drill down on your ancestors' property. This is a good way of doing it. Or if the property was part of a much larger manor, you can find it on there. I wonder if let's pick a random fun county. We'll get like an Eastern Shore county because those are older. We'll do Somerset. Just to show you what those indexes look like. Look at unpatented certificates. They're numbered. As I said, they're typically organized alphabetically. So if you kind of have an idea where in the alphabet it might fall, we'll just pick something from the middle of the alphabet. Here we go. They're going to be here alphabetically. Here we got some great names: Hard to Come, Hazard, Hickman's Prophet, Hog Harbor. They're all in here alphabetically, and these are, again, all ones that have been scanned. So we'll look at Ill Will, which was patented in 1734. I like that name. There's a lot of like fun double entendres that go into a lot of these, a lot of stuff that's a little PG-13 in some of them, which I find very funny. Not as easy to read, but you get the idea. If you have the name of a property, 9 times out of 10, it's going to show up on here. Let's see. There's a really cool one in St. Mary's County. Let's see. Too far. I want to go. Is it in here? Okay, I don't see it, but anyways.
But did you want patent? You did patent the first time, this is unpatented.
Oh, that's probably why. Yeah, this is unpatented. I want patented. I know this one was patented. Sometimes we don't always find what we want, but this is all part of.
So is there a way to search these plots by location? I know because one of my ancestors was one of the people who was friends with King George, and they gave him a lot of money to settle northern Baltimore County. But I don't know, I know his name, but I don't know the name of the property. I mean, it's probably going to be in history books, but I could find it.
Yeah, not per se, like you can't really necessarily like search by like town, or county is about as far as you can drill down. So I'm not actually seeing the one I was looking for, probably because I haven't scanned it, but anyways, it is most useful. The best use for this particular system is when you've gotten back to maybe one of your, original colonists, the original family member who's come over in the 17th or 18th century. You can kind of search by description. That you'll notice the descriptions include names. So even if you don't know the name of the property, it might be worth putting in the person's name just to see if they pop up. As I said, not everything is scanned and available, but a huge portion of particularly 18th century records are available on here. So.
Has anyone written a book on these manor names? Sounds like a fascinating study.
There are, I believe there's at least one book. I'm not sure if it covers every single manor, but certainly some of the original manors, and I'm pretty sure we have it upstairs. I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but if we go upstairs after this presentation, I'll show you the book I'm thinking of. There's indexes of manor names. You'll see them pop up a lot in, particularly in those old, like kind of late 19th, early 20th century county histories. Like if you look at, like, for instance, Sharp's History of Western Maryland or things like that, you will see indexes in some of them of all the manor names in each particular, whatever county they're looking at. But there's thousands of them, and as I said, some of them have really interesting names. You kind of wonder why they chose those. That property I was looking at earlier, Still Work. I was wondering if that was kind of like a play on words, like, is it still work, or is it still like calm, or is it, is this just a place where they're always working? I don't know.
Basically, they had a still.
Yeah, or they had a still, yeah, absolutely. That's certainly the case. So again, no single one of these tools is going to answer every single question you have. But what they do offer us is different avenues to approach this research. Again, with the Maryland inventory and with Medusa, if you know the name of a property, if you know your ancestor is associated with a property that's maybe still existing, has made it onto that inventory, you may find that a lot of the work has been done for you. If you know your ancestor is associated with a particular manor or named property in the colonial era, chances are you're going to find at least something on Plaques. You're going to find an illustration and description of that property. As I said before, your biggest tool is going to be Maryland Land Rec. Once you kind of figure out how to use it, you can do those sorts of chains of titles like the ones we saw earlier, where you just work your way back. And it can be laborious, it can be boring, it can be difficult, but that's your number one tool. And certainly it's a lot easier to do it with Maryland records than almost any other state, because they're all there at your fingertips. So with that, I thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate having an audience. It's nice to do this in person again instead of looking at a computer screen. Questions? Yes.
Earlier you mentioned Baltimore and sort of, would you clarify what that means?
Okay, so Baltimore City's a little more difficult for a few different reasons. First of all, it's just so vast. I mean, at one point, Baltimore is the second largest city in the country. There are so many people, so many records. There's a lot of turnover. It's very different, if we're talking about a home in Baltimore versus maybe a large estate out in the country. That estate might stay in the same family for generations. A townhouse in Baltimore might change hands every few years. Also, the boundaries of the city have grown over time. The city has annexed parts of the county. So it's a little different. I'll pull up. Let's see, I do saw Maryland Land Rec. Baltimore City here. And we'll just pick an index and look at it. One of the cool things they do have on here are block maps. For urban blocks, they will have maps showing kind of street by street. Very cool if you're into that. Here's an index for block maps for 1887 to 1979. These have not actually been scanned. A lot of the Baltimore stuff, Baltimore again is the city is the exception. The county courts have done a phenomenal job of getting this information in. This information for Baltimore City is at the archives, it just has not been processed yet to the same level. So, of course, I always pick the example that shows that I'm wrong. Here are block maps that do have accession numbers. So again, this is for like 1920s. This is names. Okay, so yeah, there's Calvert Bank, looks like, Sarah Wolf. And then it has deed numbers. They're a little, this is kind of tough to read. Again, I picked a poor example. But if we zoom in, we can see, you know, here's the deed that has, looks like I think these are listed by address. So, you know, 7 Mile Lane, and then underneath it, it has like the clerk's initials, book, and page number. So it does work kind of on a similar system, but much more granular because we're talking about like townhouses on dense urban blocks versus larger properties. So yeah, Baltimore's a little tougher than the other counties. Generally, the more records you have, the more confusing it gets. That's, I guess, what I'd say. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you all so much for coming today. Again, if you have any questions about this, it seems like some of you guys are already familiar with a lot of this, but you know, you can always contact me here at the Balch Library. You can contact the Archives of Maryland. You can contact your local history or genealogy library. The Maryland Room up in Frederick's phenomenal resource. Spent a lot of time up there. You can also, again, contact the clerks of the court directly using the information that's on the websites. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you.